You gave more than you were asked for. You showed patience when walking away would have been easier, offered support when no one noticed, and extended trust even when it wasn't returned. And yet, there were moments when your kindness was met with indifference, when loyalty was overlooked, and your generosity was treated as weakness. It stings because you act from integrity, because you understand value. And yet, the world often responds according to its own rules, not yours. Stoicism teaches that we cannot control the actions of others, only the clarity and virtue with which we respond. Your energy, your presence, your attention. These are powerful, but only when wielded with awareness. The strength of character is measured not by how much you give, but by how wisely you choose where and to whom you give it. Learning to honor your boundaries, to act intentionally rather than habitually, is not selfish. It is a discipline that protects your peace and cultivates respect. Over time, you begin to notice patterns in behavior: the repeated disregard, the unreciprocated effort, and the subtle ways your generosity is taken for granted. Recognizing these patterns is not cynicism, it is insight. It allows you to act from observation rather than expectation, to preserve your energy and to interact with discernment. You may have spent years assuming that others operate according to the same principles you live by.
It is the expectation that others will align perfectly with your values. Clarity comes from recognizing what is within your control and what is not. You can act with integrity, maintain your principles, and manage your intentions, but you cannot dictate the responses of others. When your kindness meets disregard, it is not failure. It is simply a mismatch between expectation and reality. Over time, you begin to notice patterns in behavior that were once obscured by repeated involvement. You may have excused behavior, forgiven without change, or adjusted endlessly for someone who did not reciprocate. Gradually, your energy erodes. Stoicism reminds us that peace comes not from controlling outcomes, but from aligning perception with reality. Giving indiscriminately without discernment sets you up for frustration. Awareness develops subtly, emerging from repeated observation rather than sudden insight. Hollow apologies, unreciprocated effort, and consistent misalignment between expectation and experience become evident. Recognizing these patterns is not cynicism, it is self-preservation. You begin to measure not the worthiness of your generosity, but the alignment of those who receive it. Where once generosity was automatic, it now becomes deliberate. Care is given to those who honor your trust. Energy is withheld from those who take it for granted. By observing and acting with intention, you protect the integrity of your actions and the value of your attention. This shift reshapes the emotional and relational landscape. Frustration diminishes because your satisfaction is no longer anchored to the behavior of others. Calm observation replaces reactive engagement.
By subscribing, you are making a quiet commitment to yourself to practice awareness, to cultivate reasoned action, and to engage in life with deliberate presence. Subscribing is not merely joining a channel. It is choosing to honor your own energy, invest in your growth, and refine the discipline of your attention through consistent reflection and observation. Anticipatory insight emerges. You start to recognize subtle signs of misalignment early, long before patterns become entrenched. Stoicism teaches that foresight grounded in reality allows for measured response rather than reactive defense. Patience is no longer passive. It is attentive and deliberate, monitoring behavior while conserving energy and presence. This allows your kindness to maintain significance, preventing it from being eroded by repeated misuse. Observing patterns, understanding tendencies, and responding with intentionality cultivates self-trust, ensuring that your actions are guided by reason rather than emotional impulse. The discernment developed through this practice creates a posture of quiet authority, calm, aware, and influential. Ultimately, this perspective changes the quality of your interactions. You no longer extend generosity to meet expectation or to correct perceived flaws. You act in alignment with principle and observation. Stoicism teaches that external events are neither inherently good nor bad. They are tests of character and opportunities for reasoned response. Acting with intention and maintaining boundaries ensures that your influence is preserved, that your presence retains integrity, and that your internal balance is not compromised by the unpredictability of others.
Stoicism emphasizes freedom as the understanding of what is within your control, a principle that anchors each relationship and guides every decision. Kindness is preserved, intentional, and resistant to misuse. The recognition that not all values are shared liberates you to act consistently with your principles, to invest where it is meaningful, and to maintain equilibrium, regardless of others' responses. The result of this disciplined approach is subtle but profound. By aligning action with observation, protecting energy, and engaging selectively, you cultivate both virtue and influence. As Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." Respect is earned through consistency rather than demanded through reaction. Influence grows through presence and reason rather than through effort wasted on unreciprocated engagement. What once created frustration now becomes a practice of reflection, intentionality, and calm observation. Generosity exists not as a vulnerability, but as an expression of aligned principle. Your presence carries weight, your influence becomes meaningful, and your integrity is maintained through clarity, discernment, and deliberate action. Relationships become sustainable, and interactions reflect the values you embody, rather than the unexamined impulses of others. Every time you allow someone to cross a line, every moment you tolerate what feels wrong or inappropriate, you are unconsciously communicating to the world how it can treat you. Disrespect is not always dramatic. Often it is quiet, almost imperceptible, a series of small gestures that slowly erode the regard you deserve. Stoicism teaches that virtue is expressed through deliberate, reasoned action, not through passive acceptance of harm or inconvenience. When you consistently refrain from responding to behavior that undermines your integrity, it sends a subtle message that boundaries are flexible, that your patience can be tested without consequence. Over time, these small signals accumulate and patterns emerge. The world does not interpret restraint as wisdom when it is unguarded. It interprets it as opportunity. Recognizing this requires careful observation and honest reflection on past interactions, noting the repeated moments when your generosity, trust, or attention was exploited. Unchecked tolerance gradually becomes a framework for repeated behavior. People learn not from words alone, but from the consistency of your responses or the lack thereof. When no limits are enforced, behavior is unconsciously reinforced. Those who push boundaries without consequence will continue to do so, because at some level they have learned it is safe. The Stoics remind us that freedom and peace are found in exercising judgment over what is within our control. You cannot change the choices of others, but you can control how you respond. And in doing so, you establish a measure of influence that protects your presence and energy. Boundaries are not barriers designed to punish. They are calibrations of your engagement, signals of respect for yourself and the order you maintain in your life. Acting consistently communicates these limits without requiring confrontation or theatrics, creating a subtle but powerful structure in how others interact with you. Maintaining these limits demands quiet discipline. It is not about aggression or proving a point. It is about preserving dignity and equilibrium. When you respond in ways that are measured and deliberate, the world begins to recognize the constancy of your principles. Those who previously overstepped begin to adjust their behavior,
sometimes without overt acknowledgement. They learn through repeated observation that certain actions have consequences, and that your attention, your energy, and your trust are not infinite resources to be taken lightly. This recalibration does not rely on anger, manipulation, or coercion. It relies on consistency and self-respect. The subtle power in this approach is often more influential than dramatic confrontation because it communicates stability, awareness, and presence. The process of establishing boundaries requires
You are not acting out of fear, reaction, or resentment, but from the understanding that the structure of your life, your energy, your attention, and your presence must be preserved in order for you to live according to your principles. Disrespect often comes disguised as small inconveniences, fleeting slights, or overlooked commitments. You may have noticed that when minor offenses are tolerated repeatedly, they grow into more significant breaches. This is the nature of human behavior. Patterns are reinforced by outcomes, and repetition teaches expectations. When you fail to respond, even subtly, you create a precedent. The Stoics remind us that wisdom is demonstrated not by what is endured silently, but by the reasoned choices we make in response to circumstances. Tolerance, in its unchecked form, is interpreted as weakness. Not through judgment, not through reactive emotion, but through the simple observation of others. Your patience can be exploited, your kindness can be taken for granted, and your attention can be assumed. Recognizing this pattern is a first step toward recalibration. Responding with consistency is not the same as reacting impulsively. It is a practice of maintaining composure while enforcing limits. Each decision to assert your boundaries, even subtly, reshapes the expectations of those around you. The Stoic principle of focusing on what is within your control guides this practice. You cannot dictate behavior, but you can decide the terms of your engagement. By maintaining calm, thoughtful action, you preserve your presence and influence. Others begin to observe, adapt, and respond to the signals you send, often without overt confrontation. In this way, influence is exercised quietly, yet effectively, ensuring that your generosity and attention are respected rather than exploited. In practicing this discipline,
the erosion of your energy, attention, and respect is prevented, replaced instead with a framework that sustains presence, influence, and integrity across all engagements. The cumulative effect of these practices is profound. You learn to navigate interactions with awareness rather than reaction, to engage selectively rather than indiscriminately, and to preserve your composure while asserting limits. Each moment in which you respond thoughtfully rather than tolerate endlessly strengthens your sense of agency. The Stoics emphasize that freedom arises from understanding what lies within your control and what does not, and this understanding shapes every interaction. By consistently acting in alignment with principle and reason, you teach the world how to treat you, not through confrontation or demand, but through the quiet, undeniable influence of disciplined presence. Respect, attention, and care are no longer assumed, they are earned, and your responses ensure that they are acknowledged and reciprocated appropriately. Silence is often mistaken for strength, yet there is a profound difference between quiet control and passive avoidance. Many of us have experienced the tension of holding our tongue, telling ourselves that restraint is the wiser path, only to watch situations fester and escalate because issues left unaddressed rarely resolve themselves on their own. Stoicism teaches that discernment must guide our actions, that timing, intention, and reason are what give virtue its power. Silence, when practiced deliberately, is
This is the subtle power of strategic silence. It forces the environment to adapt, to reveal, to respond to the stability you project. Every uncalculated reaction dilutes influence. Every measured silence strengthens it. In embracing this discipline, you create a dynamic where your presence alone communicates vigilance, discernment, and composure. At the same time, silence requires careful reflection on its purpose. Remaining quiet indefinitely, hoping for problems to resolve themselves, often leads to escalation. Ignored issues compound, resentment grows, and patterns solidify in ways that demand far greater effort to address later.
The key is not avoidance, but deliberate observation paired with timing. The Stoics teach that understanding the natural course of events paired with reasoned action is what produces wisdom and effective influence. Silence in this context is not passivity. It is an intentional choice that allows insight to guide the appropriate moment for engagement. By learning to distinguish between restraint rooted in strategy and silence rooted in fear, you transform what might appear to others as passivity into a quiet force that shapes outcomes without aggression. The discipline of silence also cultivates self-possession. In moments of tension, when emotions rise and impulses push toward immediate reaction, the ability to remain still mentally and verbally anchors you. Others may rush, argue, or attempt to provoke, but your measured observation signals a grounded presence. It communicates that you are not easily moved, that your attention and energy are not frivolously spent, and that your engagement carries weight because it is considered. This approach fosters a subtle influence over the environment, encouraging others to recalibrate their behavior, whether consciously or unconsciously. The quiet observer, grounded in reason, is often more commanding.
By exercising silence purposefully, you maintain authority, preserve energy, and allow space for clarity to guide each next step. Others adjust their expectations, often treating your time and attention with greater care because it is no longer unlimited, no longer assumed. Silence also offers insight into the world around you. In stillness, you observe without distortion, free from the noise of immediate reaction. Patterns, motives, and intentions become visible in ways that are otherwise obscured by haste or emotional interference. This insight allows you to act with precision when engagement becomes necessary, rather than responding blindly. Stoicism emphasizes that observation, reflection, and reason form the foundation of mastery over circumstance. Strategic silence is the embodiment of this principle. It is a deliberate act of presence that clarifies, informs, and positions you to respond effectively, not reactively. Through consistent practice, silence becomes a calibrated instrument, a reflection of inner discipline, and a measure of reason applying to life's unfolding circumstances. You learn to observe, to weigh, to understand before you respond. You allow the world to reveal itself, and in doing so, you ensure that when engagement occurs, it carries meaning, intention, and impact. This is the essence of strategic quiet. It protects, it commands, and it preserves the integrity of your presence. The subtle authority it generates is not sought for ego, but cultivated through conscious choice, awareness, and reasoned action. In this mastery of silence, you discover a form of influence that is enduring, resilient, and profoundly aligned with both self and...
When your focus is invested in what cannot be guided or changed, it is wasted, leaving you depleted and vulnerable. By selectively investing your presence, you maintain both influence and integrity, ensuring that your interactions are deliberate, meaningful, and aligned with your values. This practice does not diminish generosity, it amplifies it, making your energy intentional rather than scattered, deliberate rather than assumed. Detachment is a discipline that requires awareness of your own boundaries and a clear understanding of what constitutes meaningful engagement. Your energy, your time, and your emotional availability are not infinite. They are resources that must be guarded, not hoarded, but allocated with discernment. Those who consistently disregard your effort, who take without reciprocity, or who diminish the value of your attention are not failures of character. They are indicators of misalignment. By observing these patterns and withdrawing or limiting engagement, you signal that your presence is not a commodity to be assumed, but a contribution that carries significance. In doing so, you establish a rhythm of interaction where your involvement is not automatic but deliberate, creating both clarity and respect in relationships. The power of absence lies not in avoidance, but in the quiet assertion of boundaries, demonstrating that what is freely given without discernment loses meaning, while what is measured retains weight and influence and restraint.
Strategic detachment also reshapes the emotional landscape of your interactions. When you release the compulsion to be constantly available or to overextend, you remove the subtle tensions that arise from unbalanced relationships. The expectations of others no longer dictate your internal equilibrium. This is not withdrawal from connection. It is the establishment of a framework where engagement occurs on fair and mutually respectful terms. Stoic philosophy emphasizes that freedom is achieved not through control of external events, but through mastery of one's responses and the judicious allocation of effort. By deciding where your energy is warranted, you cultivate both resilience and influence. Relationships become more transparent, interactions more deliberate, and your presence acquires a weight that comes from conscious allocation rather than habitual availability. Absence is no longer empty. It is purposeful, a signal that guides behavior and conveys significance without a word. With practice, this approach begins to recalibrate the dynamics of your relationships naturally.
Those who value your presence will rise to meet it with attentiveness and consideration. Those who have taken it for granted will begin to recognize its significance in subtle ways. Detachment does not create drama. It creates clarity. It establishes a standard of interaction that is observable and consistent, shaping behavior without force or confrontation. The Stoics teach that influence flows from reasoned action and alignment with principle, not from coercion or reactive control. By strategically modulating presence and absence, you reinforce standards, protect your energy, and allow relationships to operate on terms that are both equitable and sustainable. The scarcity of your availability elevates its value, restoring the equilibrium that unguarded generosity often undermines. This practice also strengthens self-mastery, the discipline required to withdraw without emotional reaction, to limit engagement without resentment, and to allow absence to communicate significance fosters an internal fortitude that is both subtle and profound. Each choice to invest selectively builds confidence in your judgment and reinforces the principle that your time, attention, and energy are assets to be managed deliberately. Over time, the habitual practice of measured presence and absence cultivates a mindset where you are neither reactive to external pressures nor dependent on external validation. Your engagement becomes an extension of reasoned